Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. Yes, I am still coming to you from my remote location in Largo, Florida. It's not really that remote. In fact, if you look Largo up on a map, you'll find it is dead in the dead center. I wouldn't say it's dead. Of course, it's very much alive, but you know the expression. It's in the dead center of Pinellas County in Florida, halfway between St. Petersburg and Clearwater, and halfway between the east coast of this peninsula and the west coast. I mean, it's right smack dab in the middle. It takes equal time to get to the Gulf of Mexico from here one way, and to get to Tampa Bay in the exact opposite direction. But this is my remote location, as you know, or if you've been listening for a while, you know that I live in Madeira Beach, Florida, and that's where I usually do the show from. Of course, I've done the show from Pennsylvania. I've done this show from Daytona Beach. I've done this show from Orlando, various locations around Florida. So you never know where I'm going to be next, I guess. If you didn't see, my Pirates finally beat the Cubs last week, and actually for maybe a month now I've been making the joke that I thought it was possible that the Pirates would have winning records against every team in the National League this year but not beat the Cubs once. Well, it took an epic performance by Garrett Cole. It was nice to see him finally reach his potential this year. The Pirate faithful, Pirate fans, believe that he should be their ace, and unfortunately, he's done well. Don't get me wrong. The last couple years, he's been a fine pitcher. Made it to the All-Star game last year, but still waiting to take that next step. Unfortunately, I don't know, maybe it's because he's in Pittsburgh or whatever else, but I think there's some other pitchers, young pitchers like he is, who have gotten more attention. Maybe like that Syndergaard kid from the Mets, and maybe a few others. Maybe it's just because that's New York. And on top of it, though, it could be that maybe Garrett Cole has gotten started a little slow this year, actually. In fact, it was his last time against the Cubs that he had like 4 or 5 walks in 4 or 5 innings or something like that. So there's some concern out there, and overall the Pirate pitching has not been good. But yesterday, Garrett Cole got it together. No walks, a bunch of strikeouts, just a few hits, and kept the Pirates in the game while John Lester for the Cubs was throwing a no-hitter. Then finally, Marte broke up the no-hitter. Jung Ho Gung got a double, and then like an inning later, 2 innings later, Gung hit a home run, and they ended up winning 2-1. So it was nice, and it happened in Chicago. So it was all good. It was good to be a Pirate fan this weekend. Penguins fan, not so much, but I'm not much of a hockey fan anyway, so it doesn't matter. So let's get to the show. There was a couple things that occurred just within like an hour or two of me doing this show, things that came to my mind. Because as you know, I like to draw analogies, and I like to draw on my experiences from real life or from movies or TV shows or music to try to draw analogies to what is going on in politics in the United States. I also use examples from, of course, sports too, and we're going to get into a little bit of that as well as an analogy. And what brings this on today for this show is a conversation. Once again, I always talk about this friend of mine who I went to college with. We had a pretty good back and forth yesterday, each of us writing long paragraphs, long emails back to each other about what's going on. And he is still in the camp of those people who are conservative. And I tell you, this friend of mine is a conservative. But he's still weighing his options and has not come to the the quick conclusion that I've come to regarding that I can't vote for Donald Trump, I can't vote for Hillary Clinton. And we got a little discussion regarding that, and it's through those discussions, I think, that you learn that there are certain things that longtime friends can say to you that short-time friends cannot. I've known this guy for over 25 years, and I have a lot of good newer friends, specifically friends that I've made since I moved to Florida in the last 4.5 years, who are good friends of mine. But it's during these discussions I have with this guy that I know that if some of my newer friends said something like this to me, it would kind of tick me off. It's like, you haven't earned that ability to say that to me yet. And so it's interesting, and I don't mind that. I just want you to know that when people challenge me like that, I don't mind it. In fact, I like to rise to the occasion, and I hope people in my life who I've been friends with for a long time, if I say something to them that offends them, I hope they don't, react the way they would if it was just some, newer friend saying it. There's things that people go through, respect is earned and goodwill is built up, and that way, somewhere down the road, you can be very honest with each other about things, whether it's politics or whatever, and feelings aren't hurt. So we got into a little bit of that discussion this weekend, and I didn't write this to him, but like I said, because this came to me not long before I did this show, but one of my favorite movies is Breaking Away. That came out, I think, in 1979. It just happens to be a favorite movie of my brother's as well. And it's about a kid who is a bicycling prodigy who lives in Bloomington, Indiana. That movie won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay back then. It's a magnificent, magnificent movie. It's about these kids in Bloomington, Indiana, the locals, the Cutters, and their ongoing feuds with the alleged privileged kids at the University of Indiana, which is also kind of funny because the guy who was like my older brother growing up, his name was Mickey Morandini, who ended up playing in Major League Baseball, who was kind of like my older brother growing up because he lived right down the street from me. He ended up going to the University of Indiana, coincidentally. In any case, there's a spot in that movie where he's racing against these professional riders, and they cause him to wreck. They do a couple things to him, and he was all excited about racing them and them coming to Bloomington or wherever they were in the movie, and racing them and getting to meet them, and because he's so into cycling, and then he finds that they're just idiots. And they don't like how good of a bicycling, they don't like his bicycling ability. They don't like it that he has no problem staying with them through this race. And so they damage his bike while they're out racing each other. And it's a big moment in the movie. And he comes home and, because until that point in the movie, this kid could do no wrong. And he gets home, and his parents are, well, what's wrong? What happened? And he sits down, and he says, everybody lies. I just didn't know. It's a fantastic, fantastic point in the movie, and I think that's one of the main reasons I think that it got Best Screenplay. And it's that sentence is kind of how I am feeling regarding my fellow conservatives right now. See, I thought all of these years talking about being against liberalism, and I thought all of these years being against people with, lacking in character. All of us these years being against listening to radio shows and reading books and putting time in with other conservatives talking about all this. I thought that this was all true. I thought it was genuine. I guess I'm finding out that it was all just a farce, that people really didn't mean it. Because what else was going on in the movie was that this kid's last name was Stoller, Stoller. Dave Stoller was his name. His father runs a used car lot in the movie, and his dad is somewhat underhanded. Kind of will say anything to sell a car, like you think your average used car salesman is. And there's a point right before this scene that I just explained where his father just lies right to these customers' faces right in front of his son, and his son's like, "You can't do that." And it's because of that, with Dave trying to treat these customers right, that his father has a heart attack. So Dave feels a little guilty because of that. And then this bicycle race happens. And he starts to realize that maybe life is really just about lying. Maybe life, the people who get ahead, the reason that his father's used car business is so good is because his father lied. And the reason that this bicycle team that he ran into and they sabotaged his chance of winning the race, maybe the reason they're so popular is because that's what they do to their competitors as well. Remember, this kid at the time in the movie is only like 18, 19, 20 years old and has never been out of Bloomington, Indiana. So he sees the world in one way, and then he's finding out that really maybe looking at the successful people that he personally knows, that it's all just a scam. And see, that's the way I've been feeling. I really, and I haven't watched the movie Breaking Away for so long. I have it on DVD, just haven't watched it recently. But it's just weird how that particular part of the movie just popped right into my head while I was thinking about today's show. See, I thought that we were going to stand for something. I thought. That's what I had been led to believe. And I've been a conservative my whole life. All right, I'm not one of these recent converts. I am not, a David Horowitz, who was a liberal and grew up in a socialist family, and he wrote a whole entire book about it. And then somewhere down the line, when he became adult, he figured out that liberalism, socialism is not the way to go. I'm not the playwright David Mamet, who was a liberal and then in the last 10 years figured out that liberalism is a scam. I am not a convert. I've been a conservative my whole life for whatever reasons. How I became that way, not too sure. Because my parents and I hardly ever talked about politics when I was a kid. In the 80s, somewhat into the early 90s, I don't ever remember ever talking about it. But somehow in there, I became a conservative. Go figure. I don't know. And see, for the last almost 30 years since I became an adult, I'm 45 years old, I thought that conservatism was about sticking to your guns no matter what the opposition is, and not giving in just because it's convenient. I guess I was lied to. And being that I know as being part of the Never Trump crowd, and who I'm really talking to in this show are not those Trump supporters who have been in the bag from the beginning. I'm talking about all those conservatives who are now thinking, you know what, we're going to have to go to the polls in November and vote for Donald Trump. That's who I'm talking to. I can't do anything about people who have lost their minds and have been with Donald Trump since day one. I can't do anything about them. Even though I know a lot of those people are conservative as well. Well, they're the worst, but I can't get to them. Because I realize what I'm realizing, and I'm not surprised. I guess I shouldn't be. Well, let's put it this way. I am surprised, but I think I'm used to it now. That I realize that those Never Trump people like myself, those conservatives who have decided that we just can't go and do that. We can't go and vote for Donald Trump. We can't go and vote for Hillary Clinton. We may sit it out. We may go third party. Who knows? But we surely can't vote for the Republican choice this time. We understand that we're in a minority. I don't know what the percentage number is. I'm sure that number is going to change from month to month. Some people may jump into our group, and then some people may leave our group. And who knows? People talk a good game on both sides. We'll just have to see. We won't know until what happens in November. But I understand that I'm in minority. And that's the main part that's disgusting to me. I didn't know all of you conservatives were faking it. I guess you pulled one over on me. I'm usually, I've told you, I think, on this show that I don't mind being wrong, but I do mind being fooled. I think I'm smarter than that. But I got to give it to you people. You fooled me. You fooled me. You had me believing one thing when it was really something else. And just like Dave Stoller in Breaking Away, I guess I just have to figure out that everybody lies. I just didn't know. Now, the good thing about the movie, if you haven't seen it, is that Dave Stoller and his friends, one of them being played by Dennis Quaid as a young guy. Like I said, it came out in 1979, so Dennis Quaid probably would have been like 24 in that movie, but he's playing like a 19, 20-year-old. They eventually beat. Daniel Stern is also one of the kids, and the other one kid is that kid from the Bad News Bears movies. Can't think of his name right at this second, but they're all four friends. And they eventually beat the college kids in this bike race at the end of the movie. And it's a bike race that is held in real life on the University of Indiana campus in conjunction with the Indianapolis 500 that happens every year. So Dave Stoller, in the end, despite him figuring out that there are a lot of people in this world who are lied to him, and the way to get ahead in this world and be cool and be successful is lying, he and his friends eventually find their success by good old-fashioned hard work and working together as a team. I have to tell you, at this point, we as conservatives, we will be hard-pressed to do that, given what is going on. All right? So there's that. I guess I was being lied to by all these people who I thought were conservatives, and not just famous, quote-unquote, famous conservatives, well-known conservatives. I mean by a bunch of conservatives who I've known for decades, who I know are going to go and vote for Donald Trump. And I don't want to hear it. And this goes to the other part of this. This leads me to the next part. I don't want to hear it that you have to vote for Trump because Hillary Clinton is the opposition. That makes no sense to me. Okay? Here's why. And I pointed this out to this friend of mine yesterday. And this goes along with what I've talked to all of you about big government. I guess what we would call this is big politics. I gave you examples several months ago, maybe over a year ago, and this has been a mantra of mine for years, well before the Dentzel domain ever appeared on Red State Talk Radio. Is that one of the problems that we have about big government is we have a bunch of people doing things that probably 20 or 30 years ago they said they would never do. You've heard me talk about this. For example, in the EPA, these EPA officials, I'm going to guess that they're probably in their 40s or 50s. Had we found these people, because they're just regular people. It's not like they're drones. They're not robots. They have houses, they have mortgages, they have cars, they have kids going to school, college, they go on vacations, all these things. Their heart beats, their blood flows, just like all of us in the private sector. But if you could have gone in a time machine and gone back to when any of these EPA enforcers were in college, going wherever, and said to them, 30 years down the line, you're going to be fining a family $37,000 a day because they put dirt into a pond on their property. You know what that college kid would have said? I'd never do that. I can never see myself doing that. Now, maybe they could see themselves working for the federal government, and they could even see themselves, depending on their major, working for the EBA. But I think to your average 19 or 20-year-old, 30 years ago, that would have sounded crazy. But they're doing it. Why? I'm not even sure. Do they believe it? Who knows? All I know is they're doing it. Probably doing it just because they think, well, if I don't do it, I'm going to get fired. As if that is more important. So at one point in their life, they said they'd never do something because it was so outlandish and doesn't even seem like it could be possible. 30 years later, it seems like the most normal thing in the world. In fact, when these families and people who have gotten into these battles with the EPA and those same enforcers even up the ante. Taking them to court, going the whole way to the Supreme Court, not trying to come to some more plausible resolution, sitting in an office somewhere and talking it out. No. They want to take it the whole way. I brought this up also during the Lois Lerner trials, or her appearance wasn't necessarily a trial, but her appearance in front of Congress. Maybe it's, as much as I think Lois Lerner is not a good person, maybe it's a little bit of naivete on my part, but I'd like to think that, how old is she? She's in her mid-50s. So 35 years ago, she would have been in college wherever she went to school. And some time traveler would have come to her in her dorm and said to her, Lois, 35 years down the road, you're going to be working for the IRS, and you're going to use its power to harass private citizens. You know what she would have said? I would never do that. Never do that. But here she was doing it, and liking it, and trying to cover it up, and everything else. And she wasn't, of course, the only one. So now we get back to conservatives. And had I been friends with now, of course, I do have conservative friends that I knew 25 years ago. But if back then, not using any names, I would have said to them, 30 years from now, 20-some years from now, there's going to be a presidential election in 2016 where a guy's going to be running on the Republican side who is a con man, who ran a scam university, who talks misogynistically, there's a word I don't want to ever have to use again, about women, who has really been a Democrat all his life, truly, is given to Democrat causes, is flip-flopped on his pro-life, pro-choice stances all over the place. In the nomination process, he called one of his competitors. He said his competitor's father was involved in the assassination of JFK. I could go on and on and on. And you know what my conservative friends would have said 25 years ago? I cannot see myself voting for that person. But now, 25 years later, they tell me I'm the crazy one. Once again, everybody lies. I just didn't know. And see, there's another problem, and we all know this is true. And I realize that all of us, one way or another, get ourselves into circumstances that we don't see coming. None of us is perfect. We make stupid decisions every day. Some little teeny weeny ones, maybe it's like in a disc golf tournament, you pick the wrong disc and it goes into the water. Something like that is really inconsequential in the meaning of life. And then there are big ones like marrying the wrong woman. Some can be easily recovered from, other ones not so much. But in this case, there are going to be a bunch of conservatives who I think should know better, who are by choice going to go. There's no torture involved. It's not like if you don't vote for Donald Trump that you're going to be tortured. You're not going to be thrown in a dungeon. You're not going to be fined or anything else. They're doing it by choice. You know, I can forgive anybody's decisions if it's made under duress. We know there are, all sorts of strong, brave military members who've been captured by the enemy and been tortured and given up all sorts of secrets. Well, there's definitely a difference between that and one of those military members just giving the information over in an envelope in a park. One is called under torture and it's excused. The other one is called treason. But somehow conservatives don't, at least these ones who are going to vote for Trump, don't see the difference. Remember, in that question that I would ask them 25 years ago, I would never even bring up who the Democrat candidate would be, because it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. As I've told you last week, and even before that, it doesn't matter who the Democrats put up, because the Democrats are never going to put up somebody that is palatable. Of course, given how quickly conservatives have changed their minds, maybe it would be possible that the Democrats could put up somebody left-wing that would be palatable conservatives. I'm just not so sure anymore. Mainly because I don't know where the line is, and none of them can explain it to me. Not one of them back in, if I were to be able, once again, to time travel back 25 years ago, would say to me when I asked them the question about, you're going to vote for this guy, they would say it wouldn't even occur to them who the opposition might be. Why? Because they would decide there's no way I could just do it. There's just no way I could do that. None of them would say, well, tell me who the Democrat is, and then maybe I'll make a decision. Nobody would admit to that back then, because they'd sound crazy. Because then they'd have to admit that, 25 years down the road, they're going to do something that is idiotic. They just outrightly say no. But now suddenly, all these years later, it becomes a yes. There's something else that popped up right before I came onto the show. At Ricochet.com, they had a link to a Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates does this show called Daryl's House, where he plays music and he invites guest musicians to come in. Sammy Hagar, all huge, like 40 or 50 episodes that are on YouTube. And he does I Can't Go For That, No Can Do, by Hall & Oates, of course, from 1982. And CeeLo is the singer that's with him, and they do a really funky version of it. This is what, once again, it's just weird how these things work out. It's obvious to me, if you listen to that song, it's not even about a relationship. It's actually about the music industry. You want my body, now you want my soul. And I can, do anything, but I can't go for that. It's obvious to me that too many conservatives will do anything. There is no line they won't cross. They are perfectly willing to give Donald Trump not just their body, in that they're going to go and vote for the guy, but they will defend their vote for that guy under some sort of principle, which means that Donald Trump also has their soul. Well, all I have to say to that is no can do. And I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue on this dissertation, equating Breaking Away, Hall & Oates. You don't get this on any other show out there. I know you don't. I know that you don't get any analogies like this on any other conservative show or any radio show, any political show out there, drawing analogies between lines from movies from 35, 38 years ago and what's currently going on in politics in the United States in 2016. I know you don't get that, but you get it here. That's why you should listen. That's why more people should listen, and I thank you for listening. I should say that the actual technical line from Breaking Away, if you want to do a search for it, and it's probably, maybe there's even a clip of it on YouTube if you don't have time to watch the entire movie, is that Dave Stoller, in coming home after being sabotaged by that bicycling team, he says specifically, everybody cheats, I just didn't know. I think I might have said everybody lies, and once again, I think lying is much more relevant to what's going on in conservative circles these days, and people lying, obviously to me over the years, and maybe even lying to themselves, than cheating. As I've told you, Donald Trump is going to win this nomination fair and square, just the way it goes. Even I can admit that. Once again, that doesn't mean you have to go along with it, and also doesn't mean that I have to change my principles to go along with it. But moving on, where do I want to go with this? There's another part to this, and here's probably the most bothersome part. If I haven't ticked you off, and I know there are some people out there who are people who are conservative who are going to vote for Trump, and for those people, if I haven't ticked you off yet, I'm surely hope to do so with what I'm about to say next. When it all gets down to the end, and if the United States of America can't continue, whether that happens next year or 200 years from now or 1,000 years, whatever happens, I hope to be long gone by then. Here's what I know for sure is going to happen. Nobody is ever going to take any blame. Whether it's done by nuclear weapons or by a bunch of radical terrorists, radical Muslim terrorists, or some new threat, or us doing it ourselves, nobody is ever going to take any blame. They're going to want to blame somebody else. That is, you know what that is? That's part of human nature. And as I was having this discussion with this friend of mine yesterday, and like I said, this guy's very politically astute. Very politically astute, and I've had many political conversations. Probably more political conversations with him over the course of my life than any other person in my life, ever. The problem I have is that, you know, because, and this goes back to how I started the show by talking about how longtime friends can say things that maybe shorter-term friends can't. He used the words morally superior, that these people who are never Trump people, and he knows I'm one of them, saying that I think that, somewhat along the lines of it could be that a lot of never Trump people are ticking off because they're trying to portray themselves as morally superior. And I just outright asked him, do you think that I'm morally superior? And then he responded to me that, well, you just kind of were putting down people who are coming to a different conclusion. See, if somebody were to tell me that I was trying to do this and trying to put people down morally superior or something like that, that gets to me to be a little funny, because they're the ones who agreed with me for so long. They're the ones who've changed. I haven't changed. They're the ones who changed. Right? So for all these years, we thought we were morally superior to liberals. Then if they change and go along with liberals and people who aren't so conservative, that surely can't mean they're getting more morally superior, right? In fact, they've actually become more morally inferior. But what I told him was that I certainly don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. I'm just going along with what everybody said from day one regarding conservatism. Now suddenly I'm the one who's putting other people down. You're the ones who've changed, not me. It used to be at one time, we as conservatives, those people who changed their minds to give in, those people are now giving in to Trump. There was a time when they were acting exactly like me. But now that they're on the other side, they think I'm wrong. That's bizarre. It's bizarre. And once again, I don't care who the Democrat is. Because the Democrat selection is always going to suck. Always. That doesn't mean that we still shouldn't have a line over which we will not cross. Those two are totally different things. But here's what I said to him. I said to him that conservatives are going to vote for Donald Trump. And if he becomes president and things go exactly the way I think that they're going to go, and I'm not alone in that prediction, here's the problem that I have, is that nobody's going to take any blame. Nobody. You will be hard-pressed to find a conservative who will admit voting for Donald Trump if it goes exactly the way we think it's going to go. Nobody. That's the real problem. The problem is not Hillary Clinton. It's not liberals or anything else. It's a bunch of conservatives giving into their values and then not admitting they made a mistake after the fact. Because as you know on this show, I've already come out. I've already done my penance on this. I've already told you I shouldn't have voted for John McCain. I should have drawn this line years ago. Should have. The problem is that I didn't realize until recently I was one of the people who was lying too. That's the truth. That I shouldn't have voted for John McCain. I shouldn't have voted for Mitt Romney. It sent the wrong message. At least. Okay? At least them. Maybe we could even go back to the George W. Bush years, if I want to be honest. We should have never gone along as conservatives with any of this, but we did. It's time for me to fess up and say I was wrong. I'm willing to take some of the blame here. The problem is not enough other conservatives are willing to do so, because with blame comes change. When feeling guilty comes change. And the problem is, none of these conservatives who will go out willingly by choice and vote for Donald Trump in November, they will never admit anything. And what I told this friend of mine is that they won't take any blame. And when you don't take blame, that is a moral problem. And if they aren't willing to take blame, I told them, then you know what? I am morally superior. Because being able to say that you're guilty, that you made a mistake, that you're to be blamed at least partially for what went on, is a moral decision. Admitting that you're wrong. When you can't, it's the opposite of morality. Because I have a feeling in the end, everybody's going to be pointing their finger at everybody else. That's my belief. You know, that human ego, it can certainly be something, can it? You know, I was listening to, I forget who it was now, talking about Donald Trump. It was some other podcast. Maybe it's from ricochet.com or whatever, but oh, I know who it was. It was Stephen Hayes from Weekly Standard. And he was talking about his son, who is now old enough, 10 or 11 years old, to maybe understand a little bit about how his dad's involved in politics. And you get a bunch of 10-year-olds, and they kind of maybe know who Donald Trump is and everything. And his son asked him one day, Dad, why don't you support Donald Trump? You know, kids are making fun of you, and because I guess some of their kids see Stephen Hayes, their schoolmate's dad on TV and everything. And Stephen Hayes, he has multiple children, 3 children or something like that. This is his oldest. Sat his son down and started to explain, well, here's what Donald Trump did here, and here's what Donald Trump said there. And Stephen Hayes, in doing this show, once again, now I think about it, was on the Ricochet main podcast, said that I don't want my son or my children to know or to think that their father would go along with a guy like that. See, it's not even the politics. And that's what I think these pro-Trump people don't get. It's the character side as much as whatever the policies might be. And that's why I keep saying that it's kind of funny how all these people who are pro-Trump, they'll go on and on and on and on and on, and never mention that their candidate is also a very flawed person. And so Stephen Hayes in particular mentioned how Donald Trump made fun of this one New York Times reporter who is handicapped or has multiple sclerosis or something like that. You remember that from a few months ago. And you know what his son said to him? I wasn't there. This is what Stephen Hayes says his son said. After all these explanations, his son said to him, 10, 11-year-old kid says to him, why would somebody do that? And see, in that, and you know how much I don't like to give children credit for anything political, because I generally think that most young people don't know what the hell they're talking about. But it is those words, why would he do that, is that you get the essence of why we Never Trump people have decided to do what we're doing. Why would he do that? It's an interesting question. Why do people make fun of disabled people and people who have Down syndrome and handicapped people? It's a good question. You know why Donald Trump did it? Because the guy opposes him. Donald Trump couldn't confront this guy on the merits of whatever case this New York Times report. Maybe the guy was totally off base. But no, Donald Trump had to make fun of an ailment, a disease, a physical limitation that this guy has. That's what you will get with Donald Trump as president. Once again, I don't care what the other side does. There are either standards or there is nothing. There's either standards or there is nothing. And as long as your standard is that we have to stop the Democrats, then you will accept anything Republicans or any other political party will do. And guess what? You're doing it. And that's the problem you run into with several of these people. Once again, not the hardcore supporters that have been with Donald Trump since day one, but for those conservatives that maybe had another choice, and that choice is now not running anymore. Where is the line? If Donald Trump isn't the line, then where is the line? Is there any line? Because I would swear that if I were to ask you that question, once again going into my time machine, 25 years ago, you would have explicitly told me there was a line. You would have been able to define it. You would have seen it in your head. You could have written it down. If person does this and this and this, I'm not going to vote for that person. But now, all things have changed. Giving in everywhere. There is a line from The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek, one of my favorite books. And he talks about this. Talks about these people who make these decisions and they think they're going to get one outcome and it's completely something else. And see, that's what's going on here, I think. That too many conservatives are going to convince themselves that picking Donald Trump is the right choice. And then when they don't get what they want, you know what? Once again, they're not going to take any blame, and they're going to be all confused. When it was all out there for them to see months before the election. But Friedrich Hayek talks about that, where people continue to make decisions and that, at some point they realize they aren't anywhere close to where they thought they were going to go. And what those people never do, he points out in the first chapter, I forget what the first chapter is, unfortunately, The Road something or something like that. The Road Undiscovered or something like that. Forget. Not once, though, will those people ever admit that the decisions that they made were wrong. It has to be something else. Now, in his context, he's talking about socialism, the planning of economies, the experts, the planners, things like that. I'm talking about conservatives and making decisions. Whereas it's clear to me, and once again, this is why I believe I have to own up and say that I was wrong. The truth is this, is that John McCain, us going along with John McCain, brought this on. Us going along with Mitt Romney brought this on. Absolutely brought it on. It weakened us up after body blow after body blow after body blow. And then Donald Trump saw an opening and went straight for the knockout. But nobody's ever going to admit that. All right? Everybody thinks that, well, we had to vote for John McCain because the opponent was Barack Obama. We had to vote for Mitt Romney because the opponent was Barack Obama again. Not realizing that something else was opening up. We were opening up a weakness, and what we showed is that we would compromise. That's what we showed. It made us very comfortable to do that. And that's another reason I think that so many conservatives aren't even flinching when the decision is to vote for Donald Trump. And once again, I don't care who's running on the other side. The other side is always going to be unpalatable. So it's not a viable argument. So it's fascinating. The truth is there's more that's going on here than just politics. There's a lot of psychology going on here. What people think about the United States, how they perceive it, how they perceive themselves. I'm sure there are even enough conservatives out there who are thinking to themselves, you know what, I'd probably act the same way if I was Donald Trump, knowing that I had to do that because I was running against Hillary Clinton. I'm sure there are a lot of conservatives today convincing themselves that all this stuff that Donald Trump has said, all this crazy stuff, whether it's his butler or this new allegation that he acted as his own spokesman back in the early 90s, everybody who's going to vote for him is now trying to rationalize away it all and saying, well, you know what, maybe if I was in the same circumstances, I would do the same thing. Just keep it up, people. Just keep it up and expect that the United States is going to get better. You just keep it up. That's why I say you cannot be a party to this stuff. Alexander Hamilton knew it 230 years ago. There's one more thing, and I'm running out of time. Ramesh Ponnuru, unfortunately, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I met him on the National Review cruise and still don't know how to pronounce his last name. He makes a very good point in a National Review article today. Just he goes through why Trump happened, but it's the last couple paragraphs that are most interesting. The truth is that this anger that we build up, and I've talked to you about anger. You do not need to be angry at somebody to beat somebody. To beat Hitler, you didn't have to be angry at him. You just had to know he was wrong. But our anger has been used against us because what happens when you get angry? You start acting irrational. He says that our resentment of the media makes us susceptible to lies from people who claim to be on our side. That's very relevant. I can't tell you on my Twitter feed how many crazy stories I see being posted by fellow conservatives. Unfortunately, too many of them being fellow hosts on Red State Talk Radio. Crazy stories. In fact, once a month, my dad, he'll get some email. And I think I even talked about one of these instances a couple months ago. He'll get some email from some conservative that he knows, some fellow friend of his who's conservative, or maybe he's hooked up on some email list on some conservative site with some crazy story. Did you know this, Ed? And then I have to go through them telling him, Dad, it's not true. This is what Ramesh means. Our anger and our resentment of the media makes us susceptible to lies from people who claim to be on our side. I've told you, this craziness with our hatred of the media has gone too far, and Ramesh is right. And I've talked about that. But I'd urge you to check out that article at National Review, but I got to go. You can go to edwarddentzel.com where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also find those shows posted at SoundCloud, Podbean, Podomatic, and YouTube. edwarddentzel.com/book is where you can download the first chapter of my next novel called The Comebacks. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. Facebook and LinkedIn. You can find me there as well. I'll have you know that I'm starting my new disappearance show, the America's Missing podcast, this week, so I'm excited about that. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.